Alvarez.
I'd love to coach a game like that.
Oh, man.
They may not see a pass in the second half. And that would be the shortest second half in Camp Randall history. I'd run that clock. That game would be over. We'd be home having cocktails at 3:30.
On 100.5 ESPN and Wisconsin On Demand. Alongside former Badgers Tarek Engler and Tarek Saleh, here's Alex Gravatt.
The Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez on 100.5 ESPN and video streaming on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel, Wisconsin On Demand, wherever you get your podcasts. Good evening, everybody. A frozen Monday night in downtown Madison, Wisconsin. Not so much where Coach is in his undisclosed location. He's got a little better weather than we do. In for Alex Gravatt tonight, my name is Jesse Nelson. I am joined by the Rose Bowl champion, Derek Engler. Tarek Saleh is on assignment tonight, celebrating his daughter's birthday. Happy birthday.
Absolutely.
Hopefully Tarek's having a great time. Hopefully they're at one of the Great Dane public locations all around the greater Madison area. We're at the downtown location tonight, except for the star of this show from his undisclosed location. He is Wisconsin Badgers legend, Barry Alvarez. Coach, always a pleasure when I get to step in for Alex and host the show with you. Thank you so much for having me, both of you. And a happy good evening to you. The NFL playoffs ready to get set coming up this week. The Green Bay Packers, I was at the game yesterday at Lambeau Field. A little disappointing to see the
Sorry to hear that.
Chicago Bears come away with a victory. Coach, before we get to talk NFL playoffs and the offseason and everything that's going to be coming up for all the teams around the league, I've been meaning to ask you this. How much NFL do you watch these days? Obviously, you're embedded in college football for many people in the state of Wisconsin. You're the face of college football around here. How much NFL football do you watch on a regular basis?
I watch the Dallas Cowboys regularly. That's the team I follow.
I told you.
I wonder why.
But, to be honest with you, I'm not a big pro football fan. I love college football. Closer to it, know most of the coach. Still, Cindy will sit there with me all day Saturday and all night until the games are over, watching college football. But we follow the Cowboys. Of course, I'll follow the Packers. That's about it. I won't watch any other games.
Well, that's about what I expected, honestly, which is totally fine. Because the questions I have for you about the NFL postseason and about the Green Bay Packers as we get set to see them face the Philadelphia Eagles in the wild card round this coming weekend, it's not so much about the X's and O's of what the games are this week. It's about coaching and leadership. Producing Wilde and Tausch every weekday from 9 to noon on ESPN Wisconsin. We took a lot of phone calls this morning reacting to the Packers' loss to the Bears yesterday, and a lot of conversation about head coach Matt LaFleur and his leadership of the team heading into the postseason. The Packers stumbled with losses to the Minnesota Vikings last week, and then at home to the Bears in Week 18 in a game that wasn't totally meaningless. They could have won, and had Washington not scored late to defeat the Cowboys, then the Packers could have moved up to be the 6th seed in the NFC. Instead, they're the 7th seed. They go to Philadelphia for a tough matchup with the Eagles this week. But, Coach, what I wanted to ask you is this. The Packers do not have momentum going into the playoffs like they did a year ago or like they've had in some of their great runs over the last several years. They have stumbled to the finish line. You, as a head coach, if you have a team that stumbles to the finish line but then gets set for postseason play, what's the message that you would share for your team in that locker room this week, getting set to reset everything and visit the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, I would take the approach, a new season, forget about what's happened. Everything's ahead of us. We have as much opportunity as anyone, and I'd really get people cranked up for reloading and getting after that first round game.
Derek, does that work for you as a player?
Well, Coach said it from the get-go. The reason he's a college football fan is because he's a legendary college football coach. When you get to the National Football League, you're dealing with a lot of different variables that, you can't just flip the switch like that, like Coach could with us, to win championships. And, I think there is a lot of truth to that, and how you find what that trigger is or what that strategy might be is very challenging, and I when you lose 2 going into the playoffs, limping in like that, I'm just telling you, having played in that league, it ain't good. It ain't good.
That's interesting because obviously I produce Wildy and Tausch every weekday morning. Tausch was very optimistic this morning, saying that yesterday's game means
you know what? You almost had to buzz me. BS. Because I listened to
It's okay, we're not on the radio live tonight. We can blur it out.
Tausch was all fired up, and he never gets fired up. He's all fired up. He's so defensive. He's backpedaling, and you can't play pickleball, Tausch. What the hell are you doing? I mean, he got so fired up. And he literally did, and he was pissed. He was pissed in his language. I could hear it on the radio. I mean, it was, but he's optimistic. What in the heck?
I didn't realize.
Why was he upset? Was he upset because they lost 2 in a row?
Well, Tausch was upset with
playing.
Yeah, Tausch was upset with the fans of the Green Bay Packers who were ready to say that the season's over, that it's time to, this thing's donezo, time to move on to the offseason, one and done in Philadelphia. Fans that seem to have given up a bit on the ride that this season has been. The Packers have lost 6 games this year, 1 to the Bears in Week 18 yesterday. The other 5, 2 have been to the Lions, 2 have been to the Vikings, 1 have been to the Eagles, the 3 other better teams than the Packers in the NFC playoff picture. Every other game except the Bears game, they've beaten the teams that they are better than. So Tausch's belief is that the Packers just haven't put it all together in the biggest games of the year, but by no means are they like a one-and-done playoff team like many of the fans calling into the post-game show yesterday or calling into our show this morning were saying. And the rest of us are just trying to be realists, Coach, and Tausch is up there like, everything's great, we're going to be fine.
If Tausch would have been with Saleh, Coach, and I, he probably would have got some hard truths.
Well, I would guess that they better get their best shot to get their best game plan and give their best shot this week. But they're certainly capable. That's the thing. We can all see that they're capable, but you got to play well. And it's hard limping in with 2 straight losses going into the playoffs against a very good Eagles team.
Coach, I know it's different from back when you were coaching at Wisconsin and, it wasn't a playoff format where you could lose a finale but then go on a run winning several games and try to pursue a championship. But a team like Ohio State in this year's college football playoff that lost its finale to Michigan, didn't make it to the Big Ten championship game, here they are in the national semifinals with a chance to play in the championship. So that's a team that stumbled to the finish line, but they've flipped the script. They've turned it around, and now they're in a great chance. They're the favorites right now, according to ESPN Bet, to go and win the title. So what is it that you can say in those weeks leading up to that start of the postseason that does hit those right triggers, like you mentioned, and turns it around?
Well, that's a coach's job. You sit down, you take a look at the film, you show your players where they have let down, where they're not playing up to their capabilities. And it's obvious that they didn't against Michigan. They're a better team than Michigan. And point that out, and then get after them and really get your guys motivated in playing that next game. I felt all along, we have a little, at my golf club, we have a little pool, and I picked Ohio State all the way through. I just felt that they've played in big games. They understand big games. I think their coaches understand how to play in big games, and of course they have so far.
Now, this is fascinating to me. Coach is in a college football playoff bracket pool at the golf club. Like, my opinion doesn't mean anything. I'm just a talking head around here. But when I'm in, like, a fantasy league with my cousins, they're like, oh, that's the ESPN guy. He's picking, he must know what he's doing. Do people see you pick Ohio State at the start of the season? They're like, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about anymore. He's lost it. And then sure enough, here they are at the end. What's that dynamic like when you're in this pool? That's amazing.
I didn't let anyone see my picks.
Always playing it close to the vest. Coach Barry Alvarez here on the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez. I'm Jesse Nelson in for Alex Gravatt tonight with former Badger Tarek Engler and, of course, the Wisconsin Badgers legend Barry Alvarez. So last note on the Green Bay Packers here as they get set for the playoffs against the Philadelphia Eagles. We've also seen a critique of Jordan Love as a developing quarterback and that he seems uncomfortable in the system. Coach, if you're coaching up a quarterback and it seems like he's still finding his identity out on the field, what are the types of techniques that you can go through a course of a season or even a couple of years of a career to try and hit the right buttons to get someone in the best position to succeed? What's your approach to developing a quarterback?
My approach would be find what he does best, and that's what you emphasize with him. Don't try to have him fit into a playbook that you've run for forever, or this is what everyone else uses. Whatever he does best, that's what's emphasized week in and week out and built on.
Derek, does that make sense from what you've seen?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I got a question for Coach, and he doesn't have to answer this, but just from a I look at Matt LaFleur, and I look at his body language on the sidelines. I look at his press, or see his pressers and
right.
and everything else, and I as a former player, it would be tough for me to rally around that guy. I'm just saying that he might be a genius, an offensive-minded genius, but I see a lot of. I don't know. Maybe that's out in front of the media, and then in the locker room he's a different guy. But you gotta. I can't see him getting fired up.
Why do you say it's tough to rally around that? That's interesting.
Well, that's really important. Yeah. It's really important because that's the leader. That's your head coach, and I don't care what level it is, because. And maybe it's changed because I played a long time ago in the National Football League, but it was no different back then. Even a Jim Fossil, who was a limp, you know what? He had to do it. R.I.P., Coach. Anyway, he had to do it. And he did do it all the way to the Super Bowl. I mean, he challenged the New York media. Nobody does that. He did. And so there's certain things about Matt LaFleur and I'm like, man, you watch them all.
I do, yeah.
The press conferences.
So, Coach, let me ask you this, because Tausch was pretty critical last week of Matt LaFleur in the loss to the Vikings. He's been very demonstrative on the sidelines this year. If a call doesn't go his way early, he's kind of putting the arms in the air, and he's showing some visible frustration, getting after the officials. And Tausch said it's not like every time. I think this was the exact quote from Tausch. It's not like every call, it's like someone stole his dog. Like, you can play it a little safer sometimes.
You know what? I give Tausch, ring the bell. Whoever, Riley, ring that bell. God dang.
So, Coach, how conscious were you of your demeanor on the sidelines and what that meant for the team rallying around you and what that meant for leadership?
First and foremost, I think a coach has to be himself. You can't put on an act for your players or for the officials or for the fans or anyone else. You have to be yourself. I happen to be very demonstrative. I happen to be very vocal on the sidelines. I wasn't afraid to tell the officials what the call should have been, because I always see them right, And but it's important that they're themselves. Don't try to act like Newt Rockne or whoever it might be on the sidelines. But still, your players. You want your players to play with passion. A coach has to have passion on the sidelines. He has to have energy on the sidelines, and he has to be into the game and react to the game.
Is there such thing as too much energy and too much passion where
Coach just said it. Don't be fake. Yeah. Don't be fake. You got to be truth. You got to be who you are as a coach, who you are as a person. And if you're in that profession, number one, you better have passion. Otherwise, you're not going to make it too long. So I just made that observation because, I see the media, I see his pressers, and, the NFL's different. I get it. But at the same time, you got to get fired up a little bit too.
You got to. Let me share a good story with you. I was at Notre Dame. We're talking to coaches about philosophy, and one of our coaches, one of the wise old coaches that we had, Joe Moore, comes around to Joe and he says, I don't want to be a train when I coach. And everybody says, what the hell are you talking about, Joe? You don't want to be a train. He said, well, let me explain something. When I grew up, there was a railroad track maybe 15 feet behind our house. My bedroom faced that railroad track, and every night at between 3 and 5 in the morning, a train would go by, and it would wake me up. So after about 2 weeks of waking up in the middle of the night, I decided to pretend like I didn't hear that train anymore. And so I just blanked that train out of my out of my mind, and I slept throughout the night. Now, as a coach, if I'm yelling at a player all the time, saying the same thing all the time, I turn into a train. I don't want to be a train.
That's amazing.
Oh, Joe Moore, he's classic now. I mean, he recruited me, and I had to go meet him outside the school so he could have a cigarette.
Oh, that's awesome. The Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez on ESPN Madison and the ESPN Madison YouTube channel. Jesse Nelson in for Alex Gravatt tonight, along with Tarek Engler and, of course, Badgers legend Barry Alvarez. The Great Dane Pub and Brewing Company is a Madison original, brewing award-winning craft beers for over 30 years. Whether you're a fan of Pilsners, IPAs, stouts, or sours, the Great Danes team of brewers always have something great on tap. Head over to one of their locations, Fitchburg, Hilldale, East Madison, or right here downtown, and enjoy their beers today. The Great Dane Pub and Brewing Company, Madison's original brew pub, serving award-winning beer and great food since 1994. The Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez. Again, Jesse Nelson, Tarek Engler, and the coach Barry Alvarez with you here on ESPN Madison and the ESPN Madison YouTube channel. While we're talking NFL playoffs and coaching, I do want to ask you this, Coach, because this is the season for a lot of coaching vacancies, either at the NFL level or, of course, at the college level, too. You notoriously have said you are the search committee. Search committees use you. That's one of your classics, and we love it. So whether you're at the NFL level, the college level, I have so many questions about what the hiring process is like for head coaches at all these different programs. Let's start with the college level, of course. When you held interviews for candidates to become the head coach at the University of Wisconsin, or when you've aided in some of the other programs around the country that have recruited your services, what are the things you look for? What do you encourage others to look for in head coaches?
Well, first and foremost, what I always had was a short list. I had a short list for all sports. You know, as the seasons go on, and you recognize somebody's doing a good job, you keep a list of the top coaches out there that you'd be interested in hiring. And then when you do have a vacancy, you have something to go to right away, people to contact. Most of them now have agents. You have to work through an agent to make arrangements to meet and interview. But I always thought it was important, especially if you're going to make the change, you better have somebody in mind and somebody ready to hire before you let someone go.
And now, so what are the kinds of, questions that you would ask a head coaching candidate? What's the conversation like? When you have somebody that walks in those doors and they want to take over leading a program, what are the things you ask that person? What are you looking for in those conversations?
Well, one of the first things I'd want to do, I want to know what they knew about our program. I wanted to know if they if they studied enough or were interested enough that they would take the time and research our program, talk to people maybe who had coached here, people who had played against us, about our program. I'd want to hear that. And through the process, I always wanted to hear how a coach is going to get close to his players. I always felt, that was important, that the coaches have to care about the kids and the development of the players. It's still all about the players. And I wanted guys that were educators, guys that wanted to teach, guys that cared about kids, guys that really wanted to develop the kids and would get to know their parents, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some things that were important. You have to, if you follow someone, you see the brand of football that they're coaching. You can see how a team plays. That reflects the personality of a coach. And that's why you should have a lot of that, your research and your people narrowed down who you really want to talk to when the job opens up.
Awesome. I have several more questions, but first I want to go to you, Tarek, because as a player, when you have a new coach that comes into the doors, or when you move on to a new team and you're playing for a new coach, what are the things that you try to do right away to connect with that head coach? And again, this could be at someone taking over at the NFL level, when you're drafted and you go to that level, when you go to college. What do you do?
College, NFL, you just keep your head down. The NFL is the NFL. But college, very fortunate, obviously, having Coach Alvarez, the entire time. But we did make a change. Billy Callahan, who's an unbelievable offensive line coach, and went on to pursue his NFL aspirations, and Coach brought in Jim Huber, who was my O-line coach, and he was already coaching the running backs, but truly he was more of an offensive line coach, a little bit of a run game coordinator as well, of course. And I was a little, as much as everybody hated Billy, Billy got the best out of everybody. He literally got the best out of everybody. I mean, that guy, that is your absolute model of an offensive line coach. Nuts, detailed to the nth degree, and relentless. And we're going to be the last ones out here. We're going to be the first ones out here, and we're going to rep and rep and rep and rep and rep. And that was Billy. Hughes was not that. Hughes was more. He was really good at coaching in the film room and technique and stuff, but not necessarily on the field. So it was a completely two different coaches. So I was a little nervous about that until. It was actually my senior year practice, and we opened up, I think, 96 with Eastern Michigan. This nose guard played 10 years in the NFL, by the way. His name was Lionel Dalton. And I battled, and I had some good plays. He had a couple good ones, too, but Hughes didn't let me live it down. And he got after me. We would go out to Stanford the next week. The whole week in practice. I mean, I'm taking these poor scout team D-line players 15 yards down the field and dumping them. And he grabbed my face mask, and I grabbed him by the throat. Oh, yeah. This is on practice. Oh, yeah. And oh, yeah. So this was a different side of Hughes that I didn't know. And he brought me up to his office after practice, and he goes, "That's what I need out of you. That's what I want." Which I was, and that's the Coach Alvarez had just a great, I don't even understand how he had the understanding how to surround himself with a good staff like he had through the years. And always promoted the guys, always promoted them. I mean, that's impressive. There's no question.
That is awesome. Yeah. I could listen to you guys tell stories for all night long. You're on the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez, Jesse Nelson, Tarek Engler, and the coach Barry Alvarez. So I'm glad that Tarek brings that up, Coach, because my next question for you is it's not just the head coach. Like, that's the beginning for many of these programs. How do you build out a staff when you're first taking over at a new play? When you came to Wisconsin, how did you know if there was anybody you wanted to keep, if there was anyone you wanted to bring with? How does that process all play out?
You know what I felt when I first took the job, I probably needed to keep a couple of the assistants, one for recruiting purposes. They knew the state, they had recruited the state, and for a little continuity. If I had to do over again, I wouldn't have retained any of them. I'd have brought my whole group in and started anew. But that's what I did, when I came to Wisconsin, and it worked out. I mean, it worked out okay. But
I'd say
you have to have in mind, as I wanted to be a head coach, and I knew I was going to be a head coach, and I always had my eye out for guys some that I worked with, and other guys that I coached against, or I saw recruiting. When you're on a recruiting trail, you see guys that will work. They're up at 7 in the morning. You show up at a school when the doors open at 7:30, and they're there waiting, along with you. There are other guys that show up at noon. They've been out having a few pops at night and get up about 11:30 and have a big breakfast and then show up about noon or 1 o'clock. So I always used to keep a list of the guys, or knew the guys that worked hard, and those were the guys that I wanted on my staff or would try to hire on my staff. And I knew the ones that weren't working very hard. So, those are things that in preparation to put a staff together, you always keep that short list of people that you think would fit.
The Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez. Coach, I don't know the answer to this question, so feel free to share as much as you're comfortable sharing if there is anything to share. Did you ever have any legitimate chances to move on from Wisconsin and go coach in the National Football League?
I did.
Philly.
The Eagles offered me the job, tried to get me to take it. There were a couple other pro teams that, my wife just reminded me Tampa Bay and St. Louis also. She's in the other room to reminded me.
That's amazing.
that is classic.
St. Louis called too. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember, and the one you should have taken was the Bears.
So, what were those experiences like for you then? In those, obviously, if you recall a couple of them, maybe.
It's flattering, but I was interested in coaching pro football. And
there you go, Jesse. There's your answer.
Yeah.
I just had no desire to coach pro football, and Jeffrey Laurie, it was his first hire, and he just stayed after it and stayed. And finally, I told him, I said, "You paid a lot of money for this team. This is your first franchise. You just paid more than anybody's ever paid for a franchise. You need to hire somebody that wants to coach it. I don't." And
that's great. That's fantastic.
And the same thing with other. I wanted to do my goal was.
How about Miami College?
Yeah, Miami tried to hire me a few times, and I can remember telling the AD, "You know what?" He says, "You'll love it here." I said, I know I'll love it in Miami. And not only would I love it, I would be big in Miami.
Are you kidding me?
I said, but understand, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to play football in Miami. They were recruiting me. My mother wouldn't let me go. I said, I'd like to take this job right now, but my wife won't let me go.
Do you want to ask her in the other room if she has any? No, I'm kidding.
That's good.
So, all right, let's go back to the Eagles for a second. So you tell Jeffrey Laurie you're not interested in coaching the team as you're there having the conversation. Why take the meeting then? Why have that conversation?
Leverage, Jesse.
No, I never used it for leverage. I never went back and said, I've got opportunities to leave. I never used it to leverage my contract or to get a bump in salary. I
didn't say you, Coach. I just meant the perception.
I should have. Looking back now, I probably should have.
So what was it that was appealing to the opportunity to have that conversation then?
Well, he just showed. I was at the Super Bowl, and he came up to me and called and said, "I'd like to come." And I forget. He came to my hotel. Came to the hotel and wanted to meet. And I agreed to meet with him. But I think there was a second meeting. I was just trying to be courteous, but I knew I wasn't going to take the job.
That's fascinating stuff. Barry Alvarez, the Great Dane Huddle.
I had coaches on the staff. Billy Callahan was one, and Chili. Yep. Those guys really wanted to coach in the NFL bad. Yep. They were dying. I think they both ended up going that next year and taking jobs. But,
Billy did.
Yeah, and Chili, I think a year or two later, he went too.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Interesting perspective and fascinating just hearing some of these stories from Barry Alvarez here on the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez. Jesse Nelson in for Alex Gravatt tonight, along with Derek Engler. No Tarek Saleh. It's his daughter's birthday. Happy birthday. And so he has the night off enjoying the birthday festivities. We're going to enjoy a couple of festivities here at the Great Dane here in just a moment. We'll take a quick commercial break, and on the other side, we'll come back, talk more about the college football playoff. Of course, the semifinals coming up a little bit later this week, leading up to the national championship. First year of the 12-team playoff format. We want to remind you, Janesville Kia is located right off of Interstate 90, and it's only minutes away from Madison. They treat people the way they'd like to be treated at Janesville Kia, and that's why they're up 78% over last year. See for yourself why people all over Wisconsin have experienced the difference of Janesville Kia and told their friends. Come see Kia's groundbreaking lineup of award-winning vehicles with an industry-leading 10-year, 100,000-mile limited warranty. Experience the difference great customer service makes today at Janesville Kia. We'll be back after a short break. It's the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez on ESPN Madison.
Chet?
This is the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez on 100.5 ESPN and the ESPN Madison YouTube channel. Jesse Nelson along with Tarek Engler at the Great Dane Pub and Brewing Company downtown location, one of the four Great Dane Pub and Brewing locations all around the greater Madison area, joining us from his undisclosed location in a fairly warmer climate than we have here in downtown Madison
Great
tonight.
state of Florida.
It is the legendary Wisconsin Badgers head coach Barry Alvarez. Awesome conversation throughout the first part of the show tonight, talking about coaching, the National Football League with the playoffs coming up, coaches' perspective of hiring process. That was all fascinating, Tarek.
Oh, it always is with Coach. You know that. What I found a little bit interesting, and I kind of told you this, is, Coach is not, he's got a grandson playing in the National Football League and a Pro Bowler, by the way. So that's his interest. It never waned. there was a reason he turned down the Philly job. Apparently, I didn't know about the Tampa job, and there may be a couple other ones there too. But
apparently, he might not have either.
Touche. Well, we got Cindy for that. So, I will tell you, and there's a reason for that, and it's the legions of his former players and alumni that are so loyal to this day, that come back, that want to see him, that message him, that send letters, thank yous. There is a culture that you have to build as a teacher, not only as a head coach, and then instruct your staff, right? This is the program, and this is how we're going to do it. That's really impressive, and that it doesn't surprise me one bit that coach didn't have any interest in the National Football League, because you can't really achieve any of that. I mean, you could get tidbits, here and there, but not what you can do, at least back then, at a college football program.
Coach, I'm sure Derek speaks for many when he shares that commentary. Anything you want to add before we move on and talk a little college football playoff?
Yeah, I meant to mention, as I interviewed coaches and as I talked to them and listened to philosophy and all that, the one thing that I wanted to hear from them, I wanted to hear, and I wanted to recognize that they cared about their players. That, do you take your players home with you? Will you have each of your players at your house for dinner? How do you get close to players? Every once in a while, someone, I'm not worried about getting close to my players. I don't care if they like me or not. It's about respect. I'm not going to hire that guy. I want him to care about them.
That is a great point.
I wanted to hear that they truly cared about them. They wanted to develop them. They followed their careers. They were close to them. They got to know their families. All those things were important to me, and I lived by that when I hired coaches.
The Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez on ESPN Madison and the ESPN Madison YouTube channel. Fantastic insight into the hiring process of coaches and just what the experience has been going from role to role throughout the course of many, many years. The Great Dane Pub and Brewing Company, Madison's original brewing award-winning craft beers for over 30 years. And whether you're a fan of Pilsners, IPAs, Stouts, or Sours, I'm a fan of all of them, the Great Dane's team of brewers always has something great on tap. Head to one of their locations in Fitchburg, Hilldale, East Madison, or, of course, right here where we are tonight, downtown, and enjoy their beers today. The Great Dane Pub and Brewing Company, Madison's original brew pub, serving award-winning beer and great food since 1994. The Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez, Jesse Nelson, Derek Engler, and the Wisconsin Badgers' legendary former head coach Barry Alvarez. With you here from the Great Dane Pub and Brewing Company downtown location. College football playoff semifinals are coming up this week, Thursday and Friday. Still getting used to this new format, but I love it. The Orange Bowl on Thursday night, Notre Dame and Penn State, and then the Cotton Bowl on Friday night, Ohio State, and a home game for Texas, playing that right in their backyard down there in Dallas. Coach, what do you think of the potential that some of the national media outlets are starting to freak out a little bit about of an all-Big Ten national championship game potentially here between Ohio State and Penn State in a couple of weeks?
Oh, I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Shut up that Southeast Conference a little bit.
They're not even in it. Does Texas count? They've only been in the damn conference for a year.
I love that this playoff format has flushed out some unique situations here that we would not have seen in past years. Of course, Georgia would have been in that national championship game as the SEC champion. Instead, here they are bounced in the quarterfinal.
Jesse, we talked about this last week. All of a sudden, the SEC invented NIL, and then it got influxed into the rest of the country. So, now, look at where we're at now. And then in April, we get another $21 million. Okay.
It's crazy. So, Coach, besides picking Ohio State to win the pool at the golf club, what are you most excited to watch for here this week in these By the way, it's 5 days of football: Thursday, Friday, and then the NFL playoffs Saturday, Sunday. Right. It's going to be an amazing full 5 days of football. What are you most excited to watch here in these games?
You know what? This whole thing, the games have been great. I've really enjoyed the games. I'm looking forward to. You got 4 classic big name schools. That's only appropriate that first year that these are marquee schools making it down to the Final Four. You'd like to see some others, but I think for the first year, this is really sets the stage. But they're playing great football right now. There'll be outstanding matchups. You want to see who shows up, who on the big stage, who's going to be the man, who's going to be the person that makes the big play, who's the one that's going to come out of here, a hero. So that's always fun to watch, and then you have some that you can root for being in the league.
It's tough to say, and I understand because this is not even a full year yet complete of this new 12-team playoff. I love the format. I love the first-round buys for the conference champions. That's been maligned by some people nationally. I love the entire format that it feels to me like it combines the best of both most deserving and best teams, which has been the big argument over the last decade and well beyond when it goes all the way back to the BCS and before. I love the format. I think are there any conclusions, either of you, that you can make here from watching this first year of the 12-team playoff, whether the format benefits certain teams or the conference championships and how those have been impacted? Are there any conclusions that you're ready to make from what you've seen so far this year, Derek?
Well, I'm going to defer to Coach right away.
Okay.
Well, let me just say this. First of all, I've been impressed. I thought it would be good for college football, but it's great for college football. You have more teams that are involved. You have more people and that are invested or have a team that they're invested in that are still alive going into it, and that just makes college football healthier. And the cream comes to the top. It's to watch them play right now at this high level. It's just been phenomenal. I've really been pleased with it. I like the expansion, and I think it's done wonders for college football.
100% agree. There's a lot of criticism. Obviously, when what was top 4 seeds don't make it.
Yeah, the top 4 seeds all with the first round buys all lost.
So the seeding, it's the first year, so you gotta fine tune it a little bit, and whatever you do, who cares?
There's always going to be criticism.
Yeah.
There's
Right?
always going to be criticism.
It wouldn't be college football without it, right?
Yeah. I don't.
Room, when you had to pick a couple teams, So you pick 12, you got 13, 14, 15, and 16 all raising hell.
Right. I think this is going to be a discussion in the offseason that of expansion, because there was so much, as Coach was saying, attraction to this type of playoff type of tournament. Now, I don't know how much more you can go, maybe 16. But, we can't go into a basketball tournament. It's football.
No.
So, that would be it. And then you sneak a Georgia and, South Carolina, whatever. Good for the SEC because they're going to be lobbying for it because they didn't make it.
Yeah, and then you have these 13th, 14th, 15th ranked teams who are freaking out and crying that they didn't get into the playoff, and then they get wiped by mediocre Big Ten teams in their bowl game. And it's like, look what happens.
Producer Riley out chiming in with his 2 cents.
Sorry, I'm passionate about this.
Yeah, I appreciate the passion.
You're like the mouse in the corner. Turn into Mighty Mouse. You put the cape on. God bless you.
I love it.
Thank you.
Riley's strongest take he's ever shared on
this. Now I'm done talking for the rest of the show, guys.
Bashing the SEC as we near the end here. So we started the show talking about Mark Tauscher, and I do want to close with a bit of what he said the other day, too, when talking about the college football playoff and the one thing that he would do, he's now the entertain me crowd, so he enjoys the 12-team playoff just like the rest of us. He advocated for all conference championship games to be played on a home campus. No longer a neutral site Big Ten title game in Indianapolis or the ACC in Charlotte or Jackson, wherever they are, because of the amount of travel. If you're an Ohio State fan, or a Penn State fan, let's use an example, and you're traveling to Indy for the Big Ten, you're traveling for the neutral site bowl games. In theory, you might go on the road for an opening round game. He said that's just asking too much of the fan base to make that much travel around the country over a month or 5-week span. Coach, what do you think of that idea to play the conference championship games on the home campus of the better team?
Well, that makes sense. I can see where Tausch is coming from. I heard a lot of talk today about the expense for fans that have to travel, and they were taking a couple of the teams, using them as examples, and where the fans had to go and how much it was going to cost them, for a true fan to travel across the country to follow their team. So that makes some sense.
Yeah, all 4 of these teams, this is their 3rd playoff game they'll have to play for to win the national title. And if you're Ohio State, you pay the ticket price of admission to get into your own stadium to play Tennessee. Then you go to the Rose Bowl. Then you're playing in the Cotton Bowl, where there's going to be a big crowd of Texas fans. If you're paying to go to all of those games and you're following the team around the country, it is a pretty penny, Derek, that you're going to have to pay.
Yeah, Coach is right, following the money. He was right on it. He's spot on. And that it does make a lot of sense. And you earn the right. If you got that record and you maybe get a tiebreaker because you beat the opposing team in that conference, you should host it. I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Coach Barry Alvarez here on the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez. Before we go tonight, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this. So you were not only, of course, the head football coach at the University of Wisconsin, you were the director of athletics. Your thoughts on the Wisconsin men's basketball team scoring 116 points the other night against the Iowa Hawkeyes in a win at the Kohl Center?
Couldn't have come against a better team. Could not have come against a better team. I watched that game. I loved that game.
I did awesome. Too. That was awesome.
A school record for 3-point shots made, 21 threes. They win by 31 over Iowa.
They got 40. They're halfway to 90 right now at halftime against Rutgers. So it's a different. You know what? This is fun, Coach. Right? I mean, it's different. As long as they keep doing it, and they got players that can score. Whatever.
They can shoot it, man.
Yeah.
They were casting. How about that? They were casting that ball against Iowa. I loved it. They weren't backing off one iota.
I love that they were talking about getting the record had been, I think, 18 threes made. They got that with like 3 minutes. And then they still tried like 4 or 5 more after that. They just kept going. They were like, let's just keep going.
They broke every record in the book.
I loved it.
It's fantastic.
Glad Coach did too. Yeah. The Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez every week here on ESPN Madison. Usually Alex Gravatt and Tarek Saleh are here as well. This week it's just me, Jesse Nelson, filling in for Alex, along with Derek Engler and, of course, the coach, Barry Alvarez. Guys, thanks as always for allowing me to step in here.
If you quite Wally pipped the G-Man.
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
He's on a ski
trip. You did a great job today.
Thank you, Barry. Appreciate it. Alex G was on a ski trip in Colorado this week. Can't wait to hear the stories he's going to share with you next week about that and a whole lot more. So I'll be tuning in for that. But it's a pleasure joining you guys on the show as always. Thanks to Riley Yauk, our producer. Thanks to the Great Dane Pub and Brewing Company hosting every single week. Again,
and we're going to get that date down in the Cabana.
You keep saying you're heading down to the Cabana. Just let me know when you're going.
I got to talk to Cindy. She knows all the interviews.
She knows every job that Barry was offered. She knows every detail of the schedule. I got to talk to
her first.
This is amazing.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
For the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez and Coach Barry Alvarez and Derek Engler, I'm Jesse Nelson. Alex G. Tarek Saleh back next week. Thanks so much for joining us. It's the Great Dane Huddle with Barry Alvarez on ESPN Madison.